I'm a registered Democrat. I voted for Obama twice. I voted for Trump twice, and I'll vote for Trump a third time.
It's just mind-blowing how our government spends money.
CNN having control over the mics in a way actually hurt Biden more than it did Trump.
I don't claim to be any fan of CNN or anything. I hate to say it, but they did a great job with this debate. There's going to be some kind of integration between human being into the cloud. You'll have to deny that there's only one God and that Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus died on the cross and rose for our sins. He said roughly 20 years from now, 2045.
I'm pro-life, but I'm not a woman. They label it as women's health.
Right.
I mean, this is my opinion, but I don't see how it's healthcare.
If you walked outside your front door and somebody had an infant laying down on the pavement and they had a hammer and they were about to raise it up and smash the kid's head in, would you intervene?
You know what time it is. Buckle up and enjoy the ride.
Let's be heard. Welcome to the homecoming episode of Mike G in the Morning. We are back in the greater Philadelphia area. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike G, and you're participating in Mike G in the Morning with The Law Matters. And you have a home in the Mike G in the Morning family. I want to thank Cigar Cigars for hosting us here for this special homecoming episode. We're here at Cigar Cigars in the greater Philadelphia area, the Ludwig's Corner location to be exact, but they've got several locations throughout the 5-county area and frankly in other states, so you want to check out Cigar Cigars. It's been one of my favorite places for a very long time. I also want to thank Tony the Tech, who is joining us for today's episode from Astera Productions. Maybe I got the name wrong, I'm sorry, but Tony the Tech from Astera, thank you so much for joining us. We actually found his company because they posted the Trump victory song. So we're very excited to have him here with us today. I'm back with my friend of old, Philly Chris.
Here we are.
Some of you folks are familiar that I went out to California to tend to a family medical emergency. Thought we would be out there for a couple of weeks, perhaps a month if it went really long. I ended up out there for 8 months. Philly Chris was out there with me for the first month or so, and then ultimately came back the last week to help me get back to Pennsylvania. Appreciative to him for that. And I'm appreciative for everything that happened with the Mike G in the Morning program while we were out in Los Angeles, California, and our guests in Orange County, California. We added quite a few members of the Mike G in the Morning family while being on the West Coast, and we miss you out there if you're watching. We also lost a very special member of the Mike G in the Morning program family. I want to give a special shout out to Doug Fruchet. We're going to miss you, brother. Unfortunately, Doug passed away within the last few weeks. It was very unexpected. He's far too young to be leaving us. And Doug was a great guest to have on this program. If you watched that episode, I titled it, "This Bodybuilder Has a Heart of Gold," because he truly did. What a great man, and it was a pleasure to get to know him while I was out there and see him at Gold's Venice. And so many people are going to miss Doug. He had an impact on so many people's lives. Our prayers go out to his wife and his family for losing such a great man far too soon. Doug, we're gonna miss you, brother. And I know you're on the streets of gold with Jesus, brother. But we've got a lot to talk about today. We got to recap this debate. We've also got Scott from Cigar Cigars here with us today, joining us on the program, and we're hoping to bring in Tony the Tech for some of his perspective. But let's get talking about this debate, because this has been the talk of the town lately. I'll be honest with everybody, going into this, I thought that you had to take the approach of Biden's going to come out there, guns blazing, come out there swinging. When I was a competitive athlete playing ball, early on in my career, I found it difficult to play opponents who didn't have a winning record, let's say. They were at the bottom of the division, because it's very easy to let yourself slip and play down to their level. I always found it much easier to get up for the top teams. You get out there and you're on top of your game, you know every single pitch counts. And it might have stemmed from a coach earlier on kind of suggesting that you can get away with certain pitches that you wouldn't otherwise get away with when you're playing these lesser teams, which is really bad advice. You got to show up and you got to give your A game every single time, and that's how I approached my law career. It's just every single day you go out there, you give it 110% no matter what. No matter how easy you think this is supposed to go, you go in there, you dot every I, you cross every T, you do what you got to do. And my concern was that everybody's expecting Biden to go in there and to be lost, and you see all these clips of him where he doesn't know if he should sit down or stand up, or doesn't know where the exit to the stage is, or he loses his train of thought.
Right.
My concern was Trump would be prepared for that Biden, and the Biden that showed up would be the one from the State of the Union address, who's like on double speed, right?
Right,
And he's
right.
going out there and he's energetic, and he doesn't look like the Biden you see on those clips. Well, turns out I was wrong, right? He had everybody saying that he was going to be on all kinds of medicine when he went out there, and that, that wasn't going to be fair. They talked about the rules of the debate, the fact that it was on CNN, so there was a lot of talk about that. But I was taking notes while we were sitting there watching the debate, and the first thing I have written on this page is, he's on medicine, but it's not working right. Soft words, but very fast. What do you think of that, Chris?
Yeah, that makes sense, Mike. I mean, I actually kind of thought it might go that way, but was sort of hoping we would see some of that stuff, because I have talked to friends who are on the other side of the fence, and they seem to not always see those gaffes he makes, and I think it's because of the editing and all that. But it was actually pretty difficult to watch, so much so that honestly, about 15-20 minutes into the debate, I fell asleep. I think my body just decided to put me into a coma. Then I woke up and I watched some more, and then I caught up with the rest later. But yeah, it was a little hard to watch. I actually felt kind of bad for him a little bit, as much as I don't like him.
Scott, I want to bring you in as from a different perspective, because as I understand, you're a registered Democrat, but you're not necessarily Team Biden, so you come from more of that moderate perspective, I guess.
No, I'm a registered Democrat. I voted for Obama twice. I voted for Trump twice, and I'll vote for Trump a third time. You never want to underestimate somebody. And Biden came out, and whatever they put in him just never kicked in.
That's how you felt when you were watching it, too?
That's how I felt, and I'm not disappointed. I wasn't going to vote for him to begin with, and I'm not going to vote for him now. So,
when I was out in California, I met quite a few people who voted for Obama and then ended up voting for Trump, maybe not in 2016, but in 2020. What caused that shift for you, where you voted for Obama twice and then you came around to Trump?
I voted for Obama twice because I didn't like either of the Republican candidates. That's the only reason I voted for Obama. And, I shouldn't have voted for him the first time, because who was it, Cheney, that was running against him?
McCain.
McCain was better than Romney.
Same thing, both for the military-industrial complex, right?
Exactly. Yeah, we talked about that on the show. So, yeah.
But McCain was better than Romney. And when we got to Romney, I was just there like, well, I'll just vote for Obama again. And looking back, I should have just bit the bullet and said, you know what, the Republicans got to be better than Obama.
And then, so what ended up making you lean towards Trump when he came around in 2016?
You hear so much from the Democrats, and it's just like they're lying to your face. Trump talks to you, he's friendly, he might not get stuff right all the time, but I'd rather, he just talks like a person. And I liked his policy better, and that's why I voted for Trump.
Do you think that Trump in many ways reflects the policies of an old school Democrat in certain respects?
Yes.
Because the
Yes.
Democrat Party today, or at least what we see on the left, is not what we would have seen I want to say 20, 30 years ago, but really not even 10 years ago, right?
Right, right. It's they've definitely moved way far to the left. And you know, my parents were older. They grew, you know, they were born in 29 and 34.
Wow.
So they, you know, I was raised by older people. You know, and just their values were something that were instilled into me and that I believe in.
And so then you see this shift further and further towards the left, and it's not the party that it once was.
No.
And that's how you end up with Trump.
Right.
Are there any issues in particular that come up that you say, you know what, that's just too far for me, even as a Democrat, I don't agree with them?
There are a lot of issues. The border, the transgender,
In specific,
abortion.
like with the kids being able to do it?
the kids, and even in the sports.
Sports.
And it's just something I don't believe in. You know, a girl's a girl, boy's a boy, and that's just something I don't believe that men should be in women's sports,
Or locker rooms or bathrooms, that kind of thing?
especially in the locker rooms or bathrooms.
Gotcha. You know, when you bring up the border, these are things that Clinton said, Obama said, Chuck Schumer has said, and when Donald Trump came out and said it, maybe he threw in some extra things that were distasteful that people didn't like. But when we're talking about the policy of having a strong border, this is something that was never racist until Donald Trump started to say it. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
So you were about that prior to Donald Trump coming along. And then when they tell you that it's racist after they've been saying it for all those years, is that one of the things you're talking about where you say they're lying to your face?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like a good foundation is important for the country. You know, like for your house, you have to have a good foundation. And your house has walls, right? I also believe in a strong foreign policy. And with the Democrats, you don't have that either. You know, and if you're not safe at home, that follows into foreign policies.
Gotcha. Yeah, that seems reasonable. And one of the things you're saying that they go out there and lie to your face. Throughout the debate, Biden talked about all these jobs that he got, or he added during his administration and everything like that. He talked about the fact that Trump had a deficit within 4 years that was greater than any other president. And it almost like he completely ignored the fact that there was a pandemic in there.
Of course he did, yeah.
and
True.
and failed to say what he would have done differently. I had here written down what he said about it. He said the economy was in free fall, and all this guy said it was no big deal, just inject bleach into your arm,
Right, right.
which is obviously nonsense. He brought up a few other things that were obviously nonsense. He talked about the fine people on both sides, which anybody who watched that full clip knows that the way they presented that was total nonsense. And I think it was actually Snopes, which is known for
Oh, right,
being
kinda leaning the other way.
leaning left, came out fairly recently and said that this has been debunked or something like that. It took them long enough.
Right.
And I don't want to misspeak if it wasn't Snopes, but one of these fact check organizations who's known for leaning left came out and said, hey, this really isn't true. And Biden goes out there during the debate and starts bringing up this same old talking point. And when Trump said it was debunked, he said, it hasn't been debunked. Watch it with your own eyes. Do you think anybody, after he said, watch it with your own eyes, went back and actually watched the full clip and said, you know what, that guy wasn't telling the truth? Do you think anybody did that? Or
Very few people, right?
do you think it's the people who are going to believe him are just going to believe
I
him?
think so, yeah. I mean, I guess that's the challenge, right? There's so much disinformation out there, and this fact checking, and who's right, and who's the authority, and you know, I think people should be left to their own devices to research and come up with their own decisions, but they're kind of, they've changed civilization in a way in our country where you just take these people as an authority. You know, we talked about this during the pandemic with what happened with the, you know, the zucchini and the other stuff, you know, the turnip and all that with, just go with the science and all that. Well, science changes, so it's kind of similar in a way, I guess.
And when he talks about the economy having trouble during the pandemic, I mean, is he insinuating that he wouldn't have been for lockdowns during that period of time and therefore the economy would have been thriving if he were in office during that period of time? Because otherwise it doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
And there was going to be some kind of economic impact during that period if that's the route that you chose.
Sure.
And there's no two ways about it. It's extremely disingenuous to act like that didn't even exist and this guy just did a bad job with the economy.
Right.
And one thing that nobody seems to be able to answer, and this is going back to their debates before the 2020 election, is what specifically would you have done differently that would have changed the trajectory of the way things went? And I've never heard that. I've never heard any specifics about that. All I've heard is you've done a bad job. It's also a tougher position for Biden to be in right now, because any complaint that he has, there's always the response, well, dude, you've been president for almost 4 years now.
yeah.
I mean,
I'm not sure he knows that.
he was complaining about taxes during the debate, and he was saying that it was all Trump's fault and everything. It's like, okay, well, maybe he was responsible for this bill being passed when it did, but
Sure.
you've had a few years now. If you really thought it was all that bad.
I guess he's going to think he's going to do it in the next 4, but yeah.
What'd you think of Trump's demeanor during this debate?
I thought it was interesting because I think he took a very different approach to what he's done in the past. He was much calmer and more reserved, and you know, I was thinking a lot about it, Mike. I'm glad you brought that up because I think that, you know, the whole thing with the mics, like CNN having control over the mics, in a way actually hurt Biden more than it did Trump. Because,
100%.
You know, I think Trump might have actually interrupted Biden on occasion, and by that not even being a possibility, that when Biden was having those gaffes. And honestly, I think I feel bad for the guy at this point. He's got some issues. It's pretty clear, right? We've been saying that for a while. But, you know, when he was stammering on when he did and had some speech issues, Trump might have cut him off, so that might have not continued. So, but his demeanor was interesting. I think it was almost like an art of war move where he was allowing his enemy just to destroy himself.
At one point, he said something like, "This is ridiculous." Or he said, "Like, why are we doing this? What are we doing
it's
here?"
a waste of time. Like, and he's right. I mean, and the stuff they're talking about, I'm sure we'll get into it later with the golf and the handicap and this and that. It's like
Let's talk.
what are you
Let's stay on the
doing?
demeanor for a minute,
Okay.
because it reminded me a lot of the debate that Trump had when he said, "Because you'd be in jail with Hillary Clinton." During that whole debate, he came out cool, calm, and collected, and he was in control. What I wrote down about it, and I was surprised. I'll tell you what, he probably looked his worst during the first debate with Biden because he was interrupting him. He kept jumping in,
Right.
and he just seemed like he was an out-of-control maniac, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
sure.
As somebody who has supported a lot of his policies and everything, I didn't think he performed well that night as the president. I don't think he performed well. But this definitely, almost like with them kicking off of Twitter, that ended up helping him to some degree.
Right.
Having this whole microphone muted thing seems to have helped
Yeah.
him to some degree, but it's more than that. You got to give him credit, regardless of whether or not they muted the mics. He came out there cool, calm, collected. I said something about that in the notes over here. That's one of the first things I wrote. Trump demeanor, great so far, calm. And one of the biggest complaints people seem to have about him, they say he's not presidential. Now, I don't know what that means exactly. Like you, Scott, I like the fact that he's authentic. You know, even if he's rough around the edges, even if he says things that other politicians wouldn't say because they'd be a little more polished, I like that about him. But he did look presidential with his messaging, with his packaging, right? His presentation was presidential
Yeah.
during
I
this
mean, the
debate.
Democrats have wanted him to do that, so they got it a little bit.
That's
There
probably
you
their
go.
worst nightmare,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And,
That's true.
And
Yeah.
he's from New York. You
Right.
know, like if you know people from New York, like I worked in New York. If you know people from New York, they talk like that.
Right.
Yeah. And they're
That's
different.
I have almost never noticed the complaints that other people have about him because I was raised in Brooklyn and Staten Island and spent
Right.
the first 20 years of my life in New York City, and you just meet a lot of people like
Yeah.
that. It's not a big deal. And
They're kind of used to it. It's different. I actually was in New York recently. You know, I've been going to New York a little bit more, and I stopped at a Costco to get some stuff, and there was these crazy long lines. And I sort of stepped away from my cart just for a second to grab something, and literally somebody jumped in front of me. I don't think they realized that they were doing it quite until, but I was still right there, and then I came back and I sort of looked at them, and they were like, "Oh, were you here?" And I was like, "Yeah, but it's all right. You can go ahead." And they're like, "You're not from New York, are you?" I was like, "Actually,
as soon as they cut in, the New York guy would have been like, "Oh!"
yeah." You start smashing stuff, take the cart, yeah.
My dad, obviously raised in New York, finally got him to move to the United States of America and come to Pennsylvania a few years ago.
Thank goodness.
But spending all those years in New York, he explained it to one of my friends who's not from New York with the whole Trump thing.
Yeah.
He said he's a salesman. He's a New York salesman.
Right,
If
right.
you met a New York curtain salesman, they'd say, "You see these curtains? These are the greatest curtains. These are the most magnificent curtains that anybody's ever seen. Everybody's talking about it, believe me." And now every time I hear Trump say this stuff, I'm thinking about him selling curtains. And it's pretty much the same thing, right?
That's funny, actually. I never
That's
heard that.
exactly.
Heard you say that.
You don't
That's
want to
good.
take him literally, but you want to take him seriously. I forget
Yeah.
who said that. They
Yeah.
deserve credit for it, but somebody once said that about him, and I think it's very true. Because obviously, when he talks about how, for an example, he was talking about the toilets with the new, more water-efficient green toilets. He was saying you got to flush the thing 20 times in order for it to go down.
Right.
And people are like, "No, you don't have to flush it 20 times. It's not 20." And it's like, okay, yeah. We know that you don't have to flush the toilet 20
Right.
times, but you might have to flush it 2 or 3, and that's too much, right? That was the
Right.
whole point of what he was saying. You got to flush it way too many times.
Exactly.
Maybe it's not 20,
Yeah,
but
you
it's
can't
way
take
too
them
many.
literally, like you
It's
said,
too
all the
many
time.
times. You shouldn't have to flush the toilet this much. Was his point. So you got to kind of speak Trump in that sense, right? Speak New York
Right.
in that sense in order to get it.
Yeah. You're like a Trump decoder.
Yeah, the deficit debt comparison certainly isn't fair that when you talk about what Trump had to deal with in 2020, is it?
No, I mean not at all, and that's the problem. I think that there's these sound bites, and you hear it over and over again. And Biden, at this point, I think he probably believes some of the stuff he's saying, and does he even really fully understand what is driving that stuff? I think he's so insulated from everything. So, and that happens on both sides, but I think it has a lot to do with that.
And then at what point I have over here, Biden got lost, ramble and silence. And that's the clip that everybody's talking about, where he didn't know what he was talking about
Right.
and left it. And there's one point where Trump came back to him after he spoke and he said, "I don't know what he just said, to be
Right.
honest with you, and I don't think he knows what he just
right.
said."
It's true.
And then they started to
true.
talk about abortion. Scott, you started to talk about that a little bit. I think we went off on a tangent when we were talking about some of the other issues that caused you to vote for Trump, or caused you to move away from the extreme left, I guess you would say. But you mentioned abortion, didn't you?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I'm pro-life, right? But I'm not a woman. Yeah.
Are you sure?
I checked. I'm sure.
Just double checking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. I'm
Because it's
alright.
okay these days.
I'm Irish, but I'm a guy. So. But yeah, I don't see. I mean, this is my opinion, but I don't see how it's healthcare. They label it as women's health.
Right.
Yeah.
As you have choices, sometimes you don't. But I'm just there like, when's life begin?
Right.
My life began when I was conceived.
Right.
I'm just for life. Like when someone gets murdered, right? How long do they get? I'm just there like we're supposed to be for life, and when you can end it that young, I just have a problem with it.
I was talking to somebody very recently who is pro-abortion, and a lot of these points that you're bringing up came up, and I think that there's a disconnect between the two sides on a lot of this stuff, because their point was, this is all about control. It's about controlling women's bodies, like you said. And the first point was, men have no say because they can't get pregnant. So my response to that was, if you walked outside your front door and somebody had an infant laying down on the pavement and they had a hammer and they were about to raise it up and smash the kid's head in with a hammer and kill it right in front of you, would you intervene, or would it really not be your place because you don't have any kids yourself, so you're not in that position, and you don't, who are you to say it's not your kid, certainly, or would you intervene? And they were like, of course I'd intervene. I said, so that whole I'm not a woman thing, you're not a woman so you can't talk about it, that really doesn't cut it if we are talking about a third party in that separate life that has already begun. Because if we're talking about protecting life, and it is a life, then it really doesn't matter who you are. I think all of us feel some kind of obligation to not let that kind of thing happen. Is that reasonable enough?
I agree.
Another thing, when you start talking about issues with the body and the choice, they don't seem to understand that we're talking about that third party, that innocent life, because it's not the woman's body we're talking about. It's a separate life that we're talking about. We understand that separate life is in your body at this point in time, but the fact of the matter is, when they perform the abortion, the mother's heart don't stop, right?
Right.
The mother's life don't end. It's that third party that we're concerned about. Is that reasonable enough?
Yeah, I mean, you're a lawyer. You know, if there's a mother that's pregnant and she gets killed, don't they charge, for 2 murders?
Well, there are certainly enhanced penalties in those situations, and state laws will vary as to what the degree is and everything. I personally can't say that I've handled any of those cases myself or anything like that. That's not really an area that I usually deal with. But yeah, the law does recognize that life is having ended. And Liberty from our program brought up one time, if this situation where it's the woman's body and the woman's choice and that there is no third party life involved were true, then you would have a whole separate problem with surrogate mothers, wouldn't you? Because if the surrogate mother's carrying that baby and just decides, you know what, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, it's my body, it's my choice, and I'm going to be terminating this child, I'm sure people would have a problem with that, right? If it were truly her body and her choice,
Right.
then logically it would follow that that should be perfectly fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's something instinctively wrong about that, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
So there's another point, and I don't think they understand that, because they talk a lot about, oh, well, if a woman had a miscarriage or something, they should be able to get it removed. I've never heard of any pro-life person saying that a woman can't have a medical procedure to remove a miscarriage,
Yeah, I haven't
right?
really heard that argument on that
Right.
side,
And I don't know if
I think people
either
are
of you have
reasonable with that issue.
I don't know if either of you have ever dealt with a miscarriage personally, but if you have, the thought of somebody doing that on purpose
Sure.
really messes with you, I think,
yeah.
personally.
Yeah.
To think that somebody could do that on purpose,
Yeah.
and then telling you that, no, that wasn't a life that you lost
Yeah.
when you had that
No, it's
miscarriage.
awful,
It's like a
awful
slap in the
experience,
face.
yeah.
But I don't think that the other side understands that, no, nobody's talking about anything regarding miscarriages and everything like that. Trump went out there, he said he's for the exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. He also said he's for the abortion pill, which I wasn't too thrilled to hear about. But shifting gears politically, he was correct that you have these states voting on it, and you have some of these red states that are voting to keep it around. What do you think that's all about? States like Kansas and states like Ohio, who had this on the ballot and it ends up sticking around. What do you think of that? Do you think that there are more pro-life, pro-choice? I don't even like the term pro-choice. It's pro-abortion.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I guess there's maybe, are they doing it because there's more constituents in those areas that feel that way and they're trying to get the vote, or is there?
No, no, no,
what do
no,
you
no,
think?
no,
Yeah.
no. We're talking
Yeah.
about when the public votes on this on the ballot.
Oh,
Like
I
it's on
see.
the
Oh,
ballot.
gotcha. Okay.
It's on the ballot, and
Right,
everybody
right.
gets to vote on it.
Okay. Okay.
And they end up choosing to allow abortion.
To allow it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
What do you think that's all about? Do you think there are more Republicans that are for abortion than you think?
You know, it's such a complicated issue because I think the problem too, Mike, in my opinion, from looking at it more closely, especially in the past several years with it being a bigger issue now, is that really the definition of abortion itself varies so much from individual to individual. You know, when is it okay in their minds, you know? And they mentioned during the debate the whole thing, Trump brought it up about how that one doctor said, you know, take
the
baby.
governor.
Yeah, right, and put it out, you know, and then the parents decide. And I went back and watched that clip after, and he does say that.
He
It's a real
100%
clip,
said that.
yeah,
I
like,
talked about it
so many
on this
people
program
say,
on the
right,
air,
right.
like the day after it happened. We
Yeah.
played it on the air. And Biden said, no, nobody ever said that.
like
That
how-
didn't happen.
No,
It certainly
I went back
happened.
and watched it just because I knew we were talking about it tonight. And like, how is anybody okay with that?
And there were some of the states where they were pushing for extending the limit to when it could take place.
Mm-hmm.
They had these debates on the floor, and there were questions about, let's say the baby's going to be born the next day.
Yeah.
Under this bill, abortion would be allowed, wouldn't it? And
Right.
they had to concede that it would.
Right.
So it's strange that with the disagreements on both sides, we never really get down to talking about, all right, is there any points within this that we could all agree? Could we all agree that if you do it past this point, it shouldn't be allowed? Or at least for no reason, right?
Right.
Simply out of convenience.
Yeah.
Is there any point at which abortion for the purposes of convenience should not be allowed? And it would seem that there's going to be some kind of consensus among most people that, okay, at this point, it certainly shouldn't be allowed. Even those of us who think that it shouldn't be allowed at all, right? Or
Yeah.
or outside
there
of
a
the three
reasonable time or
exceptions,
something?
is there a
Yeah.
reasonable time
Right.
that we're all like, okay, you can't do it for convenience past this point.
Right.
It would seem that there should be some greater than 50% consensus on that. No,
You would
but
think
they
so,
they
yeah.
never get
Yeah.
around to they never get votes on that stuff, do they? It always becomes about the extremes when you're having these conversations.
Pretty much, yeah.
Anyhow, probably
Yeah.
way too long.
There
on
was
that.
one thing I do want to mention about that I get a little geeky with the science stuff and I like to read that. There was something that came out, I think not too long ago in the past year or two, where scientists discovered that, you know, when the egg is actually fertilized, there's a burst of light. And that's now scientifically proven, and I find that fascinating because, you know, I've struggled. I've talked about on the show with my own religious beliefs, being raised Catholic and, you know, gone back and forth, especially when I was younger. But, like, that's in the Bible. Like, and that's fascinating that they've only discovered that recently. So is the life really from that moment of light? So if that's the case, then once the egg is fertilized,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
when you talk about the scientific aspect,
Mm-hmm.
again, back to the woman's body thing, I mean, that child has separate DNA, no?
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I'm not a scientist or anything
Well,
like
trust
that.
the
I don't
science,
claim
Mike.
to
I
be.
just mentioned some science.
Scott, you were talking about the border a little bit. Biden went on there and talked about the babies in cages thing when they were discussing the border and saying, oh, when Trump was in office, we had babies in cages and that's all I got rid of and everything. And really gaslighting the public regarding what's going on down there. Is that something that also irritates you?
Yes, I mean, you don't know who these kids belong to. And when a woman in the United States goes to jail, they don't send the kid to jail with the mom.
Right.
You know, they separate them for a reason. You have child trafficking. They don't know where the people come from to begin with much. They don't know who the kids belong to. They could belong to the people, they could not. You don't know. You have to do research into the thing, and they're just overwhelmed at the border.
But a lot of those photos of cages were from the Obama administration.
Yeah,
That's
right,
what they
yeah,
failed
and
to leave
that's
out.
a thing too. So yeah, there's a lot of blame being thrown around on each side of that equation.
Biden had the audacity to say that the Afghanistan exit was a good thing. And I understand maybe in general it's good to get out of Afghanistan, but the way we did is inexcusable, no? That's something that Trump really hammered him
Yeah.
on. He said that, yeah, I fired my general, but you didn't fire anybody. You
Yeah,
should have fired
right,
those
right,
people
right.
for the way that went down. That was an absolute disaster.
That's a good point.
Yeah, he was talking about how many people got saved in Afghanistan, but it's like, oh, other than that, how was the show, Mrs. Lincoln, right? Kind of burying the lead there about what else took place in that exit, right?
Well, when you get up in the morning, you have a process before you leave the house. You know, you put your clothes on before you leave the house. With Afghanistan, they're like, well, we got out. Well, yeah, that's the end, but you know, there's stuff you get our equipment out, you know, you make sure the people are safe first, and then you leave. You know, you don't like just up and leave and then like, hey, we left all our equipment there, we left people there. You know, it's like, yeah, we got out, but
But you're naked, sir.
yeah,
Exactly.
You didn't put your clothes on before
forgot
you
your
left
pants.
the house.
Right.
Another thing Biden was talking about Social Security, because Trump was hammering on that, and he was saying that people have to pay their fair share, meaning if they got people at the top to pay more money, then it would be their fair share for Social Security. Now, I'm no Social Security expert or anything like this, but if you have these people who are making more than enough money to pay for their own Social Security, and they end up having to pay a higher percentage for everybody else,
Right.
is that really a fair share?
In a way, it's not really fair because you worked hard, you did well, and you know, should you really have to do that? I suppose maybe if you're in a position to do that, you might voluntarily do it, but to require it is a difficult thing, you know.
When we're talking about
Yeah.
Social Security specifically,
Yeah,
like if you're somebody who makes millions of dollars a year,
right.
and you have to pay this larger percentage into Social Security to pay your quote-unquote fair share, as Biden's saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you get that benefit at the end to that?
Like a
is
larger
is it
percentage
proportional?
benefit? Well, I suppose that's a great argument. You know, I think they don't do that, obviously. 'Cause
It's
I
going
don't
to be
believe-
capped,
right,
isn't
yeah,
it?
it's capped. Yeah.
I'm going to defer to you on this
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I
it's
am
my
no Social
understand- yeah,
Security
right.
expert.
No, my understanding is it's capped. And, you know, one thing I was thinking about when the Social Security stuff came up during the debate too, Mike, is that right now, all the Social Security programs are being hugely impacted negatively because of all the money that's going out to the illegal immigrants who are here. And that's being funded, I believe, in part through that same pool of money. I'm not positive on that, but, you know, we are giving out a lot of money. I got no problem with the individual people and immigrants, but when we talk about illegal immigrants, and as you know, I've been in New York recently, there's a lot of people being put up in hotels and even in medical facilities, and that's all coming out of that. So if anybody's hurting the Social Security or the long-term prospects of having that money available, would be the Biden administration, because all that money's going out now and proportional to what they're going to have later. So what do you think of that?
I don't know what to think about that, but he also talked a lot about Ukraine, and Trump was talking about all kinds of money, and Biden at one point said, we give Ukraine weapons, not money. Do weapons cost money?
I think they're free now. I think they're, I don't know. You see all these clips and shorts where all these guys are coming home with firearms and they play that thing where it's like, honey, it was free. You know?
Is there, right, yeah.
Have you seen those? So maybe
Yeah.
it's the same thing. I don't know.
Oh, there's a
You
great
know?
one that I saw the other day where this woman's on with her husband, and she says, my husband went to the guitar store and they had a great deal. He bought a guitar for $50, right? And
Sure
he's
he
like, yeah. And she said, well, there's a scam going on. You guys got to be careful of it. I looked at our credit card statement and they charged him $2,700 for this thing. And she said, so I said, you got to go return it. He said, but when he went to return it, they said they wouldn't take it back. And he was like, yeah, no, it's the policy. I don't know.
Right. Of quite the scam. Yeah.
So I guess that's what's going on with the weapons,
That
right?
must
They're
be
free.
it. Yeah. Well, we know how the.
They cost money, or they cost money to replace, right? So
I mean, hammers are like $30,000 from the government. So. You know.
Dom came on and talked
Yeah.
about all that kinds of stuff. In terms of the foreign policy, because you mentioned that too, one thing that nobody seems to be able to respond to is the fact that this situation did not happen under Trump. And regardless of how much they want to say that Trump is Putin's puppet and everything like
Sure,
that, the
sure.
fact is that he did not invade Ukraine when Trump was in office. And I haven't seen any kind of response that makes sense to me as to why that would be the case.
I don't think you're gonna get one, Mike.
If Trump
Yeah.
were in Putin's pocket, right?
Right.
Does that make any sense? Is there a reasonable rebuttal to what I'm saying?
I don't think so. It doesn't make sense. No.
But they keep repeating that over and over and over again. Is that another thing that irritates you with the
Yeah,
gaslighting?
because they keep saying it. You know, they keep saying it like, if I say it so many times, you're gonna believe it. And that's one of the things that makes me mad. It's you keep on saying it, and you're just lying to me. You know, because you always hear Trump's in Putin's pocket. Well, I don't believe you. I don't see any evidence of it. You know, if anything, Putin is not a big fan of Trump. But because he wouldn't get his way.
Yeah, Trump definitely pushes back more on all of them, you know, than the Biden administration has.
But I haven't gotten a coherent answer about why this didn't happen under Trump and it's happening during the Biden administration, yet Trump's in Putin's pocket. Not gotten and I don't claim to be any kind of foreign policy expert or anything like that. We had some hater comment on one of our videos that I was a expert on foreign policy and fashion. I am neither an expert on foreign policy nor fashion.
You're pretty good on the fashion.
I don't
I'm
claim
sure.
to be an expert on fashion, but I appreciate the compliment.
I've seen you looking pretty good, so maybe they're right about that one, Mike.
One thing I want to sort of shift gears and talk about is going into this. Trump agreed to every single one of the terms for the rules of the debate, the setting of the debate. And I was almost confused as to why is he doing this? Is he doing this so that way if it doesn't go well, he could say, well, it was all rigged to begin with? Because they made the rules, they picked it to be on CNN, they had the CNN moderators, obviously. And I was thinking, this is kind of crazy
that's an
that
interesting point,
they've got
probably.
all of the advantages here.
Right.
But what I will say is that the questions from the moderators were very fair. It is not what I expected. I thought that they were going to ask Biden about ice cream and stuff.
Right, sure.
And ask Trump, you know, why are you such a piece of garbage? You know?
Right.
But that's not really how it happened.
No,
I think they
you're
were
right.
very fair questions on both sides.
Yeah,
They asked Trump difficult questions. They asked Biden difficult questions. And they didn't get involved the way we've seen with some previous moderators.
True.
And listen,
True.
I don't claim to be any fan of CNN or anything. I hate to say it. But they did a great job with this debate, didn't they?
They did. You know, I was thinking a lot about that too, and you know, in some ways, I think they might be scapegoating him. You know, I mean, the debate certainly did not go well for him. I mean, an overall poll I just saw, I think 67% of Americans, you know, both Republicans and Democrats.
Well, you know what that means, right?
Yeah.
It means that the remaining percentage of Americans would have said that Biden won no matter
True,
what. That's
exactly,
all
exactly,
that means.
yeah.
I don't think anybody seriously watched that debate and said,
yeah.
oh yeah, Biden came out ahead.
Yeah,
real
maybe
quick."
they didn't even watch it and they pull. I don't know. I'd have to look at the polling. You know, they can manipulate these polls anyway. We've talked about numbers on the show, and you can poll, you know, something any way you want. It's actually interesting they even reported that because I think CNN even reported that. But I think Biden's over. I think they're going to pull him. He's not going to be the nominee. They can't move him forward.
I don't know,
You
man.
know?
I don't know.
think they
I
will?
think he's going to make it.
You think so?
I think
Really?
so. Because
What do you
there was a
think, Scott?
point. There was a point during the primaries, the Democrat primaries,
Okay.
where I remember exactly where I was. I was in a restaurant, and I was waiting for my food. I was talking to my dad on the phone. I was like, I can't believe that Biden's done already. Like this guy's got no chance to
Yeah.
win this primary. I can't
Okay.
believe
You were
that
saying
he's the
that?
guy to my dad on the
Okay.
phone.
And what was
And
your dad's
sure enough,
argument?
oh, he agreed with me. He said,
Okay.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
donezo,
Yeah.
man. He's there's no way he's going to make it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he was the guy.
Right.
So he came out, I think it was the following day,
Uh-huh.
Biden, after the debate, and was on fire on
Mm-hmm.
stage. Did you see this?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, it's interesting because he definitely has good days and bad days, and he didn't sound good at all. I mean, even his voice was off. He looked pale, and overall, I don't think they were maybe looking out or covering for him as much as they have in the past, which makes me believe maybe they're just going to come out and
It's a setup. So they
I think
didn't.
so.
They wanted him replaced.
I think so.
And that's why they set it up the
That's
way
my
they did.
opinion.
Okay.
I don't know, but it seems to me that
It's a theory. Yeah.
It is a theory.
Yeah.
And I think they have somebody waiting in the wings, sort of like when he was in the basement before the last election, just kind of being quiet. You can't make mistakes in the public eye if you're just kind of waiting in the wings. Then, we have how much more time left.
Well, they
before
got a problem if they do that, though, right?
I think
Because
there's
they
a
don't
lot
want
of
Harris.
problems.
They don't want Harris at the top of the
No, I
ticket,
don't think
and
they
so they're
would.
going to pass her over completely.
I think it'll be Clinton, like I believe
You predicted.
I
I have it
predicted.
written down
Yeah,
in
you
a
have it
box
written down.
somewhere.
right, you're right.
This is what happens, Scott.
yeah.
So Chris always comes up with all these things that I think are absolutely insane.
Right.
So we were sitting at my house one night, and I said, I'm going to start writing some of
Yeah.
this stuff down,
Right.
so I could put it in a box, and we could go back there and see if any of the stuff actually turns out to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And I irritate him because everything he says, I'll ask him a million questions. And he'll tell me something, and I'll
Yeah.
ask him a million questions to try to pick him apart.
Yeah.
So we said, all right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to write all this stuff down,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to put it in a box, and we'll be able to revisit this later and see how much of it came true. And one of the things I specifically remember, he said, Donald Trump will be the next president, and his opponent's going to be Hillary Clinton. And you said this is going back probably 2021, right?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was a while ago. Yeah, and I go back and forth. It is an opinion, but I as we talk about on the show, I base my opinion on a lot of different relative input metrics, if you will. Having done some numbers in the past in the corporate world and some other things, but I wouldn't shock me if all of a sudden they pull her out of the wings, or maybe Michelle Obama. Who knows? But I don't think they're going to support Biden after this.
Yeah,
I don't think they
I
can.
think he's going to, but it's ultimately going to be up to him, though, no?
Well, I
Or do
think
they have
he
some-
has to back out, but I mean, he's going to probably do what he's
How
told
could they put-
unless
what-
he's
they're
stubborn
gonna-
about it.
How
but
can they put pressure on him?
I think they have a lot of ways they could put pressure on him. Things that aren't going to be in the public eye. Just I think they probably have stuff on him and Hunter and the family and other things. And if they turn their back completely on him with some of the other stuff that's come to light to be true, and the stuff in Ukraine and money that's been moved around, and I don't know the relative facts 100% on that stuff, but I would imagine if they made certain things public, they could probably get him to do whatever they wanted him to do.
Hey, we're going to
You know?
stop ignoring the big guy gets 10%
Yeah, right,
thing.
exactly. There
We're
you
going to
go.
stop
So,
ignoring
yeah,
and
yeah.
pretend that we
Right.
never saw that.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you
come
think,
on.
Scott? Is he going to be the guy?
I don't think he's gonna leave. I think his ego, he's gonna fight tooth and nail.
He's
to
got
hold
an
on.
ego. There's that.
I think he'll try and hold on to the power as long as he can.
Well, if you're right, I'll buy you a cigar. If I'm right, you get me one.
All right, sounds good.
Either way, I'll buy you a
I
cigar.
do think he's gonna. I do think he's gonna be the guy. It'd be really.
Do you think he'll be the guy?
It'd be really messy for them to have to try.
The
and
campaign
if they're going to
funding's a
do
problem
it,
too,
it has to
isn't
do
it?
it right now,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it has to be really soon. But in my opinion, I think this was designed this way. I don't think the CNN debate was constructed this way for Biden's benefit. I do not. And I'll tell you another reason why I believe that. There were a lot of clips where Biden was left on the screen while Trump was speaking.
Wasn't
people who
that part of the agreement?
Yes. Why would you do that unless you want to hurt Biden? Because the facial expressions he made during those periods of time and the things you're seeing behind the scenes you normally wouldn't see were
And also
extremely distracting.
And also Trump making the faces while Biden's speaking.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't help Biden, in my opinion. And the people at CNN and in the giant media network, they know that. They know that's not going to be good for him, in my opinion. How would they not know that?
And it
Right?
didn't help when
It didn't help,
they
right?
showed Jill Biden leading them off the stage.
Yes,
Yeah,
they let
you
that
know.
out in the public eye, right? We did a short on the show about it. For folks who haven't seen it, check it out.
One thing, if you're going to criticize Trump, but this is just, I think he was as good as he's going to be in that setting. during this past debate. I think he did as well as he's
He
going
can
to do.
change himself in any setting. And going back to what you were asking about Mike earlier, why he agreed to it, I think he would agree to anything almost because he knows in the moment he can handle it. He doesn't use cue cards and prompters. Like the other day, the teleprompter went down somewhere, and he was yelling at the company who was responsible for that. And he's not wrong. Like if,
Don't pay that guy.
if Tony the Tech all of a sudden, his camera stopped working in the middle of this, we might not be happy with him, but he's doing a great job over there and doing a lot of manual stuff for us. And thank you again for doing this on short notice. But he can handle himself in any real situation. Like it goes back to the New York salesman guy. Somebody like that can walk into any room and craftfully interact with the people who are there in the way that is necessary in that given moment.
That's true, but he has done poorly in debates in the past.
True. Maybe he learned
Like I
from
mentioned,
that.
with the
And
first one
sometimes,
that
yeah,
he
yeah.
had with Biden, he did not come off
He was a
well.
little newer to the whole political process.
Not
too.
really. I
Yeah.
mean, he was already president for almost 4 years at that
Oh,
point.
you're talking. Okay, I thought you were talking about one of
His
your other
first
ones.
debate
Yeah.
with
Okay.
Biden
I'm sorry.
was not
Gotcha,
very
gotcha.
good.
Yep.
He's interrupting
You
and
said
everything like that.
Right.
This time he came out cool, calm, collected. So he's got to have credit.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give him credit for that. He did as good as he could do. What I did think in the back of my mind, though, is he wasn't very strong on specific policies. And that's part of
Mm-hmm.
why a lot of people like him. He's big picture, good at simple messaging, right?
True.
This is a
He connects
problem.
with
This is what
people.
I've got to fix.
Definitely connects
This is
with
a
us,
problem.
yeah.
This is what I got to fix. He didn't get into the how I'm going to fix it or anything like that.
Right.
But if you put somebody like a Ted Cruz or even a Ron DeSantis on the debate stage with that Joe Biden, that version of Joe Biden, that would have been much more brutal, don't you think?
Definitely.
Because they would have
Yeah.
been able to pick them apart with specifics on policy. Now, maybe it goes over the head of a lot of people, and maybe they'd prefer to see somebody like Trump, who's a big picture guy and is just being himself and everything like that. The
Absolutely.
presentation. Because you could say all the right things that you want, but if you don't present it properly and it goes in one ear and out the other for everybody, what have you really done?
Right.
But that did cross my mind. Could you imagine if somebody like a Ted Cruz or a Ron DeSantis were on stage against that version of Joe Biden?
Right.
That would have been really, really ugly, no?
Oh yeah, very ugly. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they had 2 minutes to respond to a question. It's hard to get into specifics when you have 2 minutes.
That's true. And if you lean too heavy on the specifics, you don't get the overall message out there.
Right.
That's true. And maybe that's what he has over these other guys and why Trump is the guy right now. Because these other guys get too far into the weeds and they don't get that overall message out there. Liberty mentioned something. She said that these big picture guys, usually the ones who end up being the president because their job is to surround themselves with the appropriate people and to work with Congress and everything like that.
Right.
Where you have governors, they tend to be more specific in the policies. I retorted to that with, well, Ted Cruz isn't a governor and Ted Cruz is in the Senate and he seems to have his specific policies down. But I thought that was interesting. It said the guy you want for the president is the one with the big picture ideas.
Right.
They don't have to be so technical on every single thing. What do you think of that?
I agree. Yeah. I mean, what you're saying makes sense. And I was thinking about something you said a minute ago about how Trump didn't reveal like his strategies, and he's kind of known for that too. He's good at that. He's not always going to tell you what he's thinking.
Yeah.
So,
So we've got Tony the Tech here with us,
Hello.
out from behind the camera to join us. I love Tony because I found Tony through posting the Trump victory song, so he is certainly not bashful about his support for President Trump. Tony, what'd you think about the debates?
Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to watch it, guys. I had to work that night. I didn't get a chance to listen to any of the commentary on the news at all. I've been busy the last couple of weeks. It's been challenging. I loved hearing your interactions, guys, and your comments. So I caught up on some news, hearing the, how everybody did and how it came out, and
Well, would a debate performance, one way or the other, have impacted who you're voting for in this upcoming election?
that's a great question.
Do you think that if Biden went out there and he was,
don't take too long to answer.
he did
Tom.
100%.
I'm right behind
If
you.
Biden went out there and did 100% and Trump didn't bring his A game, then do you think you'd be voting for Joe Biden come November?
Boy, I try to stay out of politics, guys, because a lot of my clients are Republicans, but I have a lot of Democratic clients too. So I try to be like Switzerland. I try to remain neutral. You know, I don't want to, because I've lost business when I've taken sides before.
Okay.
On both sides. So, I mean, I hope you guys respect my.
What made you decide to do the Trump video?
Yeah, that's right.
I got paid big money, you know.
Oh,
it's like
okay,
money
okay.
talks, you know, like.
Right, I got you. That's
Oh.
interesting. Okay.
And it was a creative project. It was a fun project. You know, I enjoyed, you know.
I think we've been infiltrated, Mike.
Oh, no.
I was just kidding.
Tony, that's how we found you, is the Trump victory song. Well, tell us a little bit about the Trump victory song. Now that we know that you didn't post it just for fun because you
I'm
support
being
Trump.
paid to do it. I mean, I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Listen, I make no bones. My agenda is to feed my family and provide for my my family and pay the mortgage. And,
No, that's
you
good.
know,
Those
you know,
are good.
that's
Those are.
I listen. Well, a guy named Brock Peters is one of my clients. He's in Wilmington, Delaware. He's a big Trump supporter, and I've known him for 15 or 20 years. And every political season he hires me to do these videos, and I enjoy doing it. And he called me a few months ago, and
Should get him on the show, maybe.
yeah, you would love. I'll
Yeah.
put you in contact.
Yeah.
With him. He would love to be a part of, and he hired a songwriter. He wrote the song, and he hired a songwriter in Nashville, and then he sat in my studio, and we basically chose the images and timed it to the music and put it together, and he was very happy with it. I was very happy with it, and it came out very nicely, and I've got a lot of compliments from it. So I mean, I'm very honored that you guys found me, and I'm excited to work with you guys.
All right.
What if
Yeah.
he would let us put the song in the episode?
We gotta
could
find
ask
him.
him. Yeah.
He wants all the publicity possible. I mean,
Yeah. Maybe we
he
could throw
told
it
me to
in.
put it I feel free to put it on my website, put it on any social media platforms. I mean,
Were you hesitant about that, knowing that you've lost business over this stuff before?
no, I'm not hesitant. I mean, I just, I want to, I want to play my cards properly and just be careful,
No, what I'm saying is some people would. So we looked at
Sure.
your page and saw the Trump victory song and said, okay, this guy's safe to work with. We could give him a call and he's not going to, throw tomatoes at us when we show up. But do you think
might
that?
after
Do you
this
think that?
discussion,
Did you ever? Were you ever concerned that somebody else would see that and be like, "Oh, this guy is some
Some of
kind
my
of"?
liberal clients or some of my Democratic clients, if they are, you know what?
Have you ever had anybody else approach you because of political reason?
Well, during the pandemic, I was criticized for being open, and for when we were told to shut down. I was criticized by a lot of my liberal friends on Facebook for continuing to work. Like I'm a photographer and a videographer, and I photograph a lot of weddings, a lot of events. And when things were shut down and things started to open up again, I was the first one to say, "Listen, I'll work. I don't care about."
Good for you.
But I got a lot of criticism from people saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be working, and you should be, staying at home."
Did they offer to pay your bills for you?
So I kind of and I kind of, it's so. You know what? I'm a businessman. I'm here to, but I also want relationships too. I'm also, at the end of the day, my goal is to make you guys happy, to make my clients happy, whoever they are. I mean, whatever. I try to look at everybody equally, and you can't please everybody. I
Sure.
mean, it can't. Right now my goal is to please you guys. I mean, I want to give you guys the highest quality video and audio and the best quality service and the best experience. And I want to be doing all your all your YouTube videos and all your podcasts. And when you guys go big time, I want to be there with you. When you're, I want to be, I want to.
I like that.
Tony's calling us small time. he's like, you guys suck now, but if you're ever any good.
When you guys are like killing it, like going,
Well, Tony, for all we know, you're a Democrat, right? So for all we know, you're a Republican. For all we know, you're a Democrat. We don't know who you are. You're the Dr. Pepper of politics right now. We don't
like
know
Dr.
exactly
Pepper
what
on
you are.
occasion, yeah.
But it seems that even if you disagree with everything that we're saying up here, you're still open to working with us in a professional setting. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
So I think that is something that's changed dramatically over the last few years, right?
Yeah.
That politics have become
Unfortunately, yeah.
so inflammatory
Right.
that nobody wants to work with each other. You're seeing
crazy.
relationships being broken up. You're seeing friendships being broken up. And you're seeing families being broken up.
Right.
You got people in their families not talking to each other because
Divide and conquer.
they're voting for somebody else in these situations. I think it's good to sit down and actually talk to people face to face when you do disagree.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of these things that happen online, it's much easier to have these blow up fights and then never see the person face to face ever again because of that.
Who hasn't heard stories about that?
Not
You
to
said
say-
in families and everywhere.
Yeah,
else,
not to
at
say that
work,
there hasn't been like a Thanksgiving thing where you are face to face and you still go back and forth, but I
Right,
think it's much
right.
more likely to happen online, right?
Absolutely.
Well, that's
Absolutely.
like my wife. She grew up in California. She's indoctrinated, and she didn't divorce me yet.
Wait till she sees this.
I'll tell you what though about California. I found that, sitting in an Uber several times a week out there, would start to ask these people questions. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say what side I was on or anything. I don't want them to kick me out of the car. I was in California, for crying out loud. But I would start to ask these people questions that sort of give me an idea of where they were. And through asking those questions, it would always end up them either talking about how they support Trump or they can't stand Trump. But I'll say this, 9 out of 10 of those Uber drivers supported Donald Trump in California.
I was with you when that happened a few times. Yeah, vehemently.
And a lot of people said that they didn't vote for him maybe in the past, but they're voting for him this time around.
Right.
If that gives you any gauge of what's going on, then I think he's in good shape come November.
It's a good point.
But if you talk to people who are rabidly anti-Trump, then they'll claim that these people I'm talking about simply don't exist. They've not met these people and spoken to them face to face. Or if they have spoken to them face to face, these people didn't feel comfortable enough talking to them about the way they really feel.
Right.
And I was very careful about that, not to say I'm on one side or the other
Yeah, you're good
and
that
sort
way.
of sway them.
Yeah, you're good
because
at
if you
that.
come out and say you're pro-Trump and they're driving you, maybe they want a 5-star rating and a good tip. and you're like, oh yeah, make
And then
America
they
great
give you
again.
a 1-star right after you 5-star them.
Yeah, sure, right, exactly.
Yeah, you are very good with that, Mike. I have a
But
little
I
more
would just sort of ask them
difficulty.
questions and see where they were on things.
Right.
And 9 out of 10, they would come out and say that they're voting for Donald Trump this
Yeah, I was
coming
with you when it
election.
happened. My problem is I get in the Uber and I have my Let's Go Brandon shirt on. So.
That kind of blows your cover.
Yeah, it kind of does. Yeah, although sometimes they don't know.
And they also want you to believe that everybody who supports Donald Trump is a white guy who is of a certain age.
Sure.
And these people, I met all kinds of people, different backgrounds, different ages, who were supporters of Donald Trump in the Uber.
Absolutely.
Lots of African American folks saying that they're supporting Donald Trump in this upcoming election.
Right.
People of all kinds, it's California. There's all sorts of
Yeah.
ethnicities out there.
Yeah, I talk. You know me. I'm always talking to people, and it was interesting when you talk to people one-on-one and individually. There's a large percentage of folks who have even changed their mind over the past 4 years. Especially the financial stuff with the economy and inflation. I mean, I'd love to know where they're getting these inflation numbers. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's a new thing people are doing on their shorts on YouTube where they go into their Walmart shopping cart in their phone, and there's a way to go back to old orders and reorder, and they're like 200% to 300%, sometimes
It's crazy.
400% more. So how can you say it's inflation is and Biden says it's only an inch bigger?
Yeah, right.
Well, I stopped for breakfast at a fast food restaurant the other day. I got 2 breakfast sandwiches and 2 hash browns, and it was $16.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Tony, what do you think, without telling us how you feel about it before we let you go, what do you think are the top 2 or 3 issues that Americans are concerned about in this upcoming election right now?
Well, for me as a business owner, high inflation, the way you guys just talked about, it's killing me as a small business owner. I mean, the taxes, the insurance, gas, equipment, food. It's gotten way out of control, guys. I mean, it irks me. Other issues. The amount of debt that this country's involved has got in. I don't know how many trillions of dollars
It's a good
it is,
one.
but I mean, it's just mind blowing how our government spends money. I mean, they spend it like it's coming out of trees, and it the financial irresponsibility of our government is just it just baffles me. The immigration problem. My wife's an immigrant. She's from the Philippines. But she came over here the correct way. I mean, I paid a lawyer to get her here correctly and legally. We'd see on the news all these people coming in for free, and just it's a huge problem. It's got to be fixed. I mean, those are about my 3 top issues for me that really concern me.
I was going to ask you that, Tony, because you said immigration, and I think the real issue for most people is illegal immigration, right?
Yes.
And when I was in California, the gentleman who is the engineer out there and hosted the studio for quite a few of our episodes is a great guy, and he was sitting there watching me talk about illegal immigration with all these different guests. I had him on as a guest for the final show. He's got his own program called Christian Podcast, where they discuss Christian issues. And he revealed to me on the show, I had no idea about this, but while we're rolling, he reveals to me that he is here illegally, and he's been here illegally 20 years.
Right.
So I started to follow up and ask him questions about that. And he thinks that, he understands why Americans want to secure the border and everything like that. He had no disagreements regarding tightening up on illegal immigration, and he himself has been here illegally for 20 years. I thought it was a fascinating conversation because it's not very often that somebody in our position gets to sit down and talk to people about this stuff.
And I'll tell you what, go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say, when I used to move pianos, we moved the piano to Ellis Island.
Oh, wow.
And the piano would not fit in the elevator. So they wanted us to take this 1,100-pound piano up the steepest flight of steps you ever saw. Right? And I'm just there like, no, but we're sitting there, they're trying to decide what to do. There's a plaque right by the steps saying that this was a test to test their health. If you did not pass certain tests, they didn't let you into the country.
Like going up the steps was the test?
Yeah,
Oh, wow,
because
that's
they were the
interesting.
steepest steps you ever saw.
So
If you were not
gotcha.
healthy enough to get up the steps,
Oh, wow. We
they
gotta go check
apparently
those
didn't
steps
take
out.
you.
Yeah, we got to do like
Yeah.
a Rocky
Yeah, let's
video
go
where
do
we're
it.
running up the steps.
You know,
Ba-bam.
so back in the day, people came in legally,
And there were criteria.
and there were criteria to meet.
Yeah.
That's a good
So
point.
there's legal ways to come in, and that's the way to
Yeah.
do it.
Tony, I want to go back to something you were talking about with the small businesses being crushed in this country. And you hear people on a certain side of the aisle, I don't want to drag you into this, but you hear some people will just say, talking about corporate greed and they got to pay their fair share and all this stuff. But when they impose all of these regulations and they increase taxes, for example, and it ends up hurting small business owners like yourself. Ultimately, what that does is it drives people to close up shop and go work for a large corporation. Does it not? I mean, that's how these corporations have become so
Yeah.
strong
Look what
over
happened
the
during the
years,
pandemic with
is
the big
because
ones, yeah.
all the small local businesses, the family-owned businesses, are crushed by these regulations, whatever they may be. They can't handle them, but these billion-dollar pockets can handle them,
Right.
and they end up having to take their talents over to one of these corporations. Just makes them stronger. Do you
Sure.
think there's something to that, Tony?
Yeah, I mean it's scary what's happening. I mean, small business owners are the backbone of our country. I mean, if there's too much regulation, too much red tape, and too much bureaucracy that makes us too difficult to operate, and then we have to work for a big corporation, it's going to be it's not a good thing. I mean, it breaks my heart when I see other small businesses shut down and aren't able to make it. It's getting harder and harder out there because there's so much red tape and regulation and so much bureaucracy and high taxes, and just the government's not making it easier on the small business owners, in my opinion. That's what I see. I mean, so.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Tony. We really
Thanks, Tony.
appreciate it. Tony
Appreciate
the
it.
Tech, ladies and
Tony the
gentlemen.
Tech.
Tony the Tech. ahead.
When we were talking about it, one thing I want to say too is honestly, at this point, I don't have really much issue at all with a lot of the illegal immigrants who are here. I mean, there are a lot that are criminals and, bad things have happened. That happens in the general population too, but obviously those people wouldn't be here. But I mean, I know some people who are here illegally just like you do, and they're some of the hardest working people I know, and they're just trying to take care of their families. And I don't blame them, because if I was in their shoes coming from some of these other countries, I'd probably try to find a way to get here and get my family here. And it's really a disservice to them to make it kind of easy to come across and then not deal with that issue. It's not fair to them either, because basically, they were inviting them here, and then they get here and they're being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
I don't blame
that's
them
true
at
too.
all.
Yeah, it's
they're
bad
being
for
used
that.
in a lot of ways.
Right.
So that's how I feel about it, and I think that that's wrong. And I think it's by design in a
I've
lot
got
of ways.
a buddy who his wife, when he was dating her, had been here illegally, and he wasn't aware of it. And then he found out that she was getting paid like either nothing or $2 an hour or something
that's
like
exactly
that.
it.
And
Yeah,
the boss is like, "Oh, what are you going to do about it?"
Exactly, right, yeah. They're allowed to be abused, and maybe that's by design.
I want
Right.
to talk about one other thing.
Yeah.
So there's this gentleman, Ray Kurzweil, I think his name is, and he's predicted a bunch of things in the past.
Okay.
He predicted the downfall of the Soviet Union within a couple of years. And he, in the late 90s, I think it was, talked about how AI was going to be just as smart, if not smarter than human beings by 2029, I think he said.
Really? Wow.
And at the time, everybody said, no, maybe in 100 years. And so now Bill Maher had him on the show and was asking him about it. And he said that it's not there yet,
Right.
but
Pretty darn close.
it'll probably be there in the next few years, certainly by 2029. And he was talking about how there's going to be some kind of integration between human beings
like the Neuralink.
into the cloud.
Oh,
And I
okay.
don't know all the details of it, but
Probably the Neuralink,
there's going to be
yeah.
some sort of integration or merger with human beings with this technology.
Wow.
Now, if you've looked at all the AI stuff and everything, none of them will acknowledge that there's one true God, right? I think that's fair to say. I don't think there's any AI program where you type in who is God and they'll say, the God of the Bible and
Right,
Jesus
right.
Christ is his son and he died for our sins and everything like that.
Yeah.
They'll probably say, well, who are we to know? There's a lot of different theories and everything like that.
That's interesting. Okay.
And I'd been watching a video a while back when people were saying that the zucchini was the mark of the beast. And Pastor Todd Friel on his program was saying, no, that's not the case. Regardless of what you think about it, there's going to be a decision that you have to make with the mark of the beast, and that's going to be to deny God. Like, you must deny God in order to get the mark of the beast. So with the zucchini, you didn't have to do that, so that's
Right.
clearly not it, and is what he was saying. But when I heard this guy talking about that integration, that seems like it may be it. And I could sort of go through what happened with the zucchini and everything like that and see the government shifting towards, not only is this available, but you have to do it.
Right.
Because it makes
Right.
you so much more intelligent that if you don't do it,
Yeah.
then you're going to pose a danger to everybody else who did the responsible thing and got it.
Right. Right.
And in order to do it,
Right.
you'll have to necessarily deny God.
Interesting.
You'll have to
Okay.
deny that there's only one God and that Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus died on the cross and rose for our sins. And it seems like it's unfolding in 2029
It's
might
yeah,
be
that's
the
interesting.
year.
I'll have to go watch that. I haven't seen that.
or
So,
something in that ballpark.
We're very
It
close
seems
to
like
that.
we're
I
getting
mean,
very
he
close.
predicted it that long ago. That's pretty accurate.
Or maybe he said, I'm sorry. He said by 2029, AI will be as smart as humans. But he said in roughly 20 years from now, 2045, everybody will be connected to
Okay.
this. All right. So we've got a few more years
Look how-
before it's the same. But
Look
we got
how
about
fast phones.
about
Everybody has a
20
phone
years,
now.
right?
Everybody
About
has
20
yeah,
years. Because you think about it, back then when he's making these predictions about AI being as smart as human beings and everything, we had a dial-up connection, and you're
Yeah, exactly,
you're going
right,
on
yeah,
America
right,
Online, and you
right.
got mail, and it takes you 5 minutes to load an internet page. Don't quote me on 5 minutes. I'm being like Trump now.
How many times you have to flush the
It
toilet? Mike?
certainly
Yeah.
wasn't like the way it is now.
Well, it's amazing how quickly things change, especially with technology, and we've seen the phones. I mean, the first iPhone and phones with the touch screens and all that really wasn't that long ago. I mean, as a child, I'm the oldest one on the show. 100 years old, whatever I am now. We had I remember the rotary phones. So, and now everybody's got and you're at a disadvantage. I see that with the AI becoming the problem, and I think that's Elon Musk's argument too. Is you're going to have to do it because if you're going to be in a different class.
What do you think about that, Scott?
I grew up, my parents had an 8-track soundtrack, we had the 12 channels on the TV. We went from the rotary phone to cell phones to having computers in your phone. I try to stay away from it. Like, I'm a diabetic, I wear an insulin pump, and I have the base model pump. I don't wear the sensor to check my glucose. I'm fighting it for as long as I can. But I mean,
What kind of phone do you have?
I have a smartphone. I
Okay,
have an Android.
Okay.
I use it to call. I don't text. I do use maps. Yeah, I'm fighting it, but I can see it's coming to a point where you're going to have to transition. Like, they are going to make you.
Yeah.
And I'm just fighting it for as long as I can.
Sure.
So it's fair to say that you wouldn't be down with them trying to connect your brain to a computer permanently.
No.
Could you see that them trying to force us in that direction, though? Can you see that logic that we're talking about with the whole zucchini situation?
Yes.
That if you don't get this, you're going to be a danger to other people. So you really need to do the responsible thing and get hooked up so that way you're more intelligent than a stupid regular human being.
Absolutely. I think they will use that. It makes sense. And at some point, people are going to have to decide, are they going to participate in what is modern civilization? It's even like now, you have these people who decide to go off grid, or like that guy who years ago went up to Alaska and just built his own log cabin and totally disconnected from modern civilization, other than him filming himself and later it being on YouTube. But like, but like you're going to be a lower class. I mean, how would you interact? It's even like in China now. I think pretty much everybody's issued a phone and a QR code, and if you don't have that in the social credit score, then you're going to be hauled off somewhere probably. So yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about guns because the Supreme Court came down with a couple of decisions. One being that the bump stock is not a machine gun.
Wow.
And so
How
that
surprising.
well, because you've actually read the definition of machine gun, you know how bump stocks work, right? So that's why you're sarcastically saying
Yeah, exactly.
it's surprising.
Right. Yeah.
And what I've been irritated by is sort of the ignorance from the people on both sides after this decision came down, who didn't read the decision, didn't really understand the issue, because you have people on the anti-gun side saying the Supreme Court's got blood on its hands, and they're going to put these in the hands of all kinds of dangerous people and everything like that, and people are going to be able to do all kinds of bad things with these things.
They're probably the same people that don't realize you can use a stick to do the same thing.
Or
So, yeah.
a rubber band, or your belt loop, right?
Yeah, if you know what you're doing.
And then you had people on our side saying, good, that was an unconstitutional deal to begin with, which is not what the Supreme Court said. Basically, what the Supreme Court said is, hey, agency, you don't get to rewrite the law. This is what the law says is a machine gun. Clearly, the bump stock is not a machine gun under the definition, and therefore you don't get to rewrite
Can't
it
just make your
through
own
your
laws, yeah.
regulation. If you want to ban this thing, you got to go through Congress, which you haven't done. And people seem to be missing that, because the only way that you could conclude that a bump stock is a machine gun is if you rewrote the definition of machine gun to anything that makes a gun go bang, 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 bang real fast. That's how you'd have to redefine the definition, because as is, it simply doesn't meet the definition,
meet
and
the
that was the issue here. You also had the Rahimi case, where this dealt with somebody who had been subject to a restraining order related to domestic violence. Wild fact pattern about what took place, with all kinds of shooting going on and everything like that. And then he gets prosecuted for person not to possess, because under federal law, if you're subject to a restraining order that has certain conditions, then you're prohibited from possessing firearms. Attorney argues that it's unconstitutional, and the appellate court ultimately agrees with them that that restriction was unconstitutional. Now, they didn't raise any due process arguments when they were up at the Supreme Court, meaning they didn't say, hey, you can't take away somebody's gun rights by this civil process where you don't have beyond a reasonable doubt and you don't have these protections in place. They didn't raise that, so the court didn't address that. Instead, it came down to, is this law unconstitutional on its face? Meaning, this law that prohibits those who are subject to these restraining orders, is that law in and of itself unconstitutional? And the court said, no. In order to deem something unconstitutional on its face, you have this very high standard that in no context could it be constitutional.
Gotcha.
We're not finding that here. But they also threw in a whole bunch of other stuff about how they reach that conclusion ultimately that is going to end up impacting other cases, because with some of the language in the Bruin decision, with Justice Thomas talking about how you have a historical analog for the restrictions that were in place during the founding era, right, or arguably Reconstruction. And the court said in this case, doesn't have to be a historical dead ringer. It just has to be sort of in the spirit of the Second Amendment. The wording that they used was very vague and left a lot of us who actually do this for a living reading it and saying, well, what the heck does that mean?
What does it mean?
What the heck does that mean? So I guess we're going to have to figure that out with more litigation. The issue is, with Attorney Roberts, Richard Roberts, when he's been on the program talking about the whole history, text, and tradition standard, his argument was that it gets kind of messy when you have to go through this standard, and it gets difficult to make these analyses and determine what falls into that category. Well, what they did was they just kind of stepped back from that one and gave you something that's even more unworkable. And that was the number one criticism of history, text, and tradition. They said this is an unworkable standard. Now we have something that's probably even further in that direction. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes to be. And one thing that drives me nuts, if you're watching this right now, every time you hear about one of these cases in the news about some kind of gun law or restriction being unconstitutional, you have to look at the context. You have to look at what level was that court, where was that court, and what exactly did that court say? Because every time there's any case, it could be a trial court case that's not binding on anywhere. It could be a case in the appellate courts that's only binding on a particular circuit. And people will come out and see these headlines and they'll say, oh, well, this court said this, so therefore I'm okay. I'm not prohibited anymore. And people get in a lot of trouble like that.
Just assuming.
They just assume.
Okay.
And we have all kinds of people who write in, they even get the court wrong. They'll say, oh, I saw that the Supreme Court said it's unconstitutional to do X, Y, and Z. They get the holding wrong, they get the court wrong. Please be very, very careful about this. If at all you're concerned as to whether you're prohibited, you can call us at the Gun Law Firm. You can go to thegunlawfirm.com and you can speak with us, and we could potentially do an investigation to determine whether you're prohibited. Because if you are, and you end up getting caught possessing a firearm, you're in a whole different world of trouble. Or if you go to buy a gun and you answer one of the questions wrong, you're going to be dealing with brand new felonies that you don't need to deal with. I deal with so many cases.
Somebody got in trouble for that recently, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. We could talk about that if you want. But let me finish what I'm talking about here.
I saw an opportunity for some humor.
I deal with so many people where if they would have just called us and we did an investigation for them, we would determine, hey, you're prohibited right now, but there's something we can do about this. But they didn't call us. They tried to buy a gun. They got the question wrong. They got denied. And now they're prosecuted with a new felony. Well, if any of those charges stick, the chances are it's going to be much more difficult, if not unfeasible, to restore your rights from that old case. Because now you got a brand new case.
Right.
So be smart about it. make sure that you're not prohibited before you do that. So let's talk a little bit about that Hunter case. So with that case, what happened was he marked off on the form the answer no to the question, are you an unlawful user of or addicted to a controlled substance?
Right.
And I've dealt with tons of these cases. Not in federal court, we deal with them primarily in state court, where they answer no to that question, and Pennsylvania State Police has some kind of evidence that they were, let's say, arrested for a drug crime.
Okay.
And they say, oh, well, you're an unlawful user because you were arrested for this drug crime.
Okay.
We've gotten a number of these cases straight up dismissed because the federal courts have said in the Third Circuit that in order to be an unlawful user, you have to be able to prove a prolonged pattern of use.
Prolonged pattern.
So it's
of
not
use.
just
Okay.
one use. They catch you with a joint in your ashtray.
Yeah.
But PSP's policy is they're going to deem you an unlawful user for a year from then.
Oh, is that right?
So I have these cases where they mark off no 9 months later. They say, oh, well, we found that joint in your ashtray 9 months ago, and
So they may
therefore
not
you're an
actually been
unlawful user.
using at that time, but it goes back a year.
Correct, but it's
Okay.
still just evidence of one use. And the case that I'm talking about actually comes out of the Virgin Islands, which is in the Third Circuit, same as Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And the court determined that evidence of one use 6 hours prior to finding a gun on the guy's person was not enough to deem
Really?
him an
That's
unlawful
interesting,
user.
because you were doing it more at
Because
the time.
one use.
One use.
It was one use. They
How
have
many
to
uses
show a
is,
prolonged
illegal?
Well, there's a bunch of different criteria that in trying to make these decisions, the federal government has sort of laid out these guidelines. They're not laws, right?
Okay.
But they've laid out these guidelines as to what they believe satisfies that criteria for their purposes of enforcing this law. Now, there are a couple of interesting issues with the Biden case because we deal with these cases all the time. They usually don't have enough. It's not every day that somebody walks into my office and they say, yeah, I got denied as an unlawful user. Now they're prosecuting me. Oh, and by the way, I may have taken a bunch of timestamp pictures of me using crack with a bunch of prostitutes. And they may all be available to the public now because of this whole laptop situation.
You mean it wasn't disinformation?
And I may have written a book about using drugs during that time over and over and over again.
So
So
you're saying
that's
people
a
shouldn't do
tricky
that?
situation. I'm saying people shouldn't do that. If you're going to be an unlawful user, please don't document it with timestamp photographs and then leave your laptop at somebody's place.
Right.
Or talk about it in a book. Don't do that. Or multiple interviews, right? This is an unusual case for something that we'd be dealing with.
Yeah, right.
So most of the time, people won't end up in the trouble that he does,
Yeah,
but for
yeah.
that kind of a situation. But what did you think about that?
I was just wondering what kind of form I have to fill out to own a cannon.
To own a cannon.
What caliber? What size?
A big one.
A big one.
And you're coming out strong, huh?
Came right out of the gate on that one.
the bigger
You know
the
what's
better.
so funny is
Yeah.
when I was in my first year of practice, I went out to do a gun law seminar at this place in Gettysburg called Tripwire Operations. And what they do is they do bomb training for like bomb squads
Oh,
for
wow.
the police
Wow, okay.
and for the military.
Sounds exciting.
And the first time I went there was a fascinating experience because they walk you through all of these different models of bombs that you would have seen used in historic events,
Oh,
right?
interesting.
Like
Okay.
this one is like what the Boston bombers had. And this
okay.
is one like what this guy had. And this is how they made this. And
Right.
this is what they did. And here's what you got to look out for and
Yeah.
everything. And fascinating stuff. But one of my concerns when I was going there is I'm going to get people in the crowd who are asking me like, oh, what do I got to do to be able to own a bomb? and I really don't study bomb law.
Yeah. It's like,
And I figured my witty answer to that was going to be like, well, sir, unfortunately, you came to the gun law seminar.
Right.
The bomb
Yeah,
law
the bomb.
seminar is next month.
You need a whole new seminar for that one. Yeah.
But I didn't have any. It was just regular people who wanted to learn about gun law. But I was genuinely concerned about that. I thought people were going to ask me all kinds of questions about stuff. I don't know. I don't
right.
deal with bombs. Come on, man.
Well, this is why they need to call the gun law firm, you know. It's,
The bomb law firm.
You better get the website.
We're expanding. You know, we've done April
Just for
Fool's
Scott,
jokes.
you'll do it.
We've
Yeah,
done
yeah.
April Fool's jokes on the guys at our office quite a few times over the years. And one time, what I did was I got everybody together, and I had done this seminar that was at an outdoorsman's seminar, basically. It was this huge convention, I'll call it.
Okay.
And so they had different areas where you can go and learn different things for like 20, 30-minute blocks. And I was teaching the gun law portion of it. And so we'd have classes rotating in and out. And then the grand finale was called Talking Turkey with Gary. And it was all about turkey hunting. And I sat through it. It was very interesting.
That's cool.
But when I saw the agenda for everything and saw that turkey, I was like, am I supposed to be teaching turkey law or something like that? I was kind of confused. Am I doing just like regular gun law, or do I have to have some kind of turkey aspect to this?
Is there some turkey law?
So for April Fool's Day, I got all the guys together and I said that we're going to be expanding. We're going to be expanding to turkey law. And I think there's an untapped market for turkey law.
Could be an untapped market.
And the cool thing is I get to see which guys actually call me on it. And so, you know, of course, inevitably you'll have a guy or two at the office who will be like, that's a great idea, Mike. You know, and
I'm
they'll
sure Rich
no matter
said
what I
something.
say, they'll be on board with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I did have one guy who was like, that sounds like a really good idea, Mike. I'm looking forward. This is exciting. And then I had to
so many
tell him I was
clients.
messing with him. We had another one a couple of years back where I got together with Gilbert.
Oh, okay.
Because Gilbert's got his own firm, and so he got his intern, and I got my intern, and they were both friends. They were in the same law school class, and so what we were doing was we said that I've been afforded this unbelievable opportunity, where one of these really powerful anti-gun organizations wanted me to represent all of their cases, wanted me to really take over their workload. They said that, hey, you know everything about gun law, you'll be the perfect guy to represent us.
Oh, wow.
In trying to uphold these gun laws.
Really?
And keep them on the books and everything.
Interesting.
And we're gonna pay you a stupid amount of money. It's a 10-year deal.
Wow.
And I said, listen,
trying to pull you out of the
guys.
market.
So we had this conference call, and I say, listen, you know, I got to take this opportunity for my family. You know, this is something that I just need to do. I'm going to be representing these anti-gun organizations from here on out. And so what Gilbert and I have decided is that for either one of you, if you want to come with me, then you're welcome to do that. If you want to go with Gilbert instead, then you're welcome to do that, because we understand that people have principles.
Yeah.
And Gilbert's law clerk is so cool about it. He's just like, you know, I'm just listening, just hearing you out. And I could tell that he knew that I was.
You can tell.
I
Yeah,
was
he
full of
knows
it.
you too well.
But
yeah,
my
yeah.
guy was totally
Oh, yeah.
flipping out about it. He was like, Mike, this is ridiculous. I can't believe you
can't
would do
believe
this.
you'd do it.
He's like, I understand being an advocate for your client and everything, but there's no way, there is no chance that I'm ever representing any
good.
anti-gun organization.
Well, good for
he
him.
was
Good
so
for him.
fired up, and I'm like muting the phone, laughing my head off.
Awesome.
Me and Gilbert are cracking up at
That's
this.
good.
And at the end, we had to break the news, and he's like, Oliver, you're just too street smart for us. I guess I dropped his name on here, but
Oh,
everybody
yeah,
knows
that's
that
all right.
Oliver's smart about stuff. He knew we were pulling his leg, and he just went along with it. And this
Nice.
other guy was totally, you know, Second Amendment. You can kiss my butt about this one.
Well, he stood his ground. I'm proud of him. That's
Yeah,
good.
well, he passed that test, but he failed the street smart test.
Right,
because
right. One, not
if
the other.
anybody thinks there's any snowball's chance that at any point in time I'm representing an anti-gun organization, it's simply not happening. I'm sorry. Sorry, I'm not sorry. This is
come
what
up
I've
with,
devoted
more-
my entire life
Yeah.
to. And this is what I believe in. There's a reason why I do what I do. I believe in the right to protect yourself and your family. So we help people restore their firearms rights, and we stand up for people's rights.
That's awesome.
And there's
That's
no
awesome,
two
yeah.
ways about that. That is non-negotiable. And that kind of makes voting easy in a lot of respects. I'll
True,
be honest with
true.
you. When you believe that strongly in one thing, you know you can't vote for somebody who's against something like
That's
that.
right.
Maybe you agree with them on some other issues, but that's sort of a line in the sand.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Do you think that that's why there's no meeting in the middle on some of these things, is people have strong convictions about certain things? Like, there's no
Yeah, absolutely.
compromising
Yeah,
on something
yeah,
like that. For
abortion
me,
issues definitely a big
abortion,
one. Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
you know, we're not going to agree that you can kill the unborn. I'm sorry, but we're just not going to agree to that.
Right,
Now,
right.
don't get me wrong. I think that would be a good thing if we were all able to agree on certain laws. Like I said, if we all agree that, hey, this is the time where it's no good,
Right.
no, for just any old reason,
Yeah.
I would be happy that something like that came out.
Sure.
Would I be satisfied? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
And I'm going to be honest about that. I think the problem is a lot of people aren't honest about it. When they say stuff about gun laws and everything, they say, oh, well, we're just asking for reasonable
Right,
gun laws.
yeah.
Which, whatever the heck that
Yeah, whatever.
means.
Yeah, how do you define that?
But
So, yeah.
when they say that, you know that they will never be satisfied in the long run.
Right.
It's not going to be, okay, if we give you this, you're going to leave us alone forever,
Yeah,
now, right?
no, it
you
never works
promise?
that way. They
It's
always
never going to
want
work
more,
that way.
right?
It's always going to be more and more and more.
More.
And maybe that's why people on the gun side got sick of it.
Sure.
I have a cousin who's not really a gun guy or anything like that, but he was curious about the whole back and forth debate and why a lot of gun people right now, a lot of pro-gun people, just aren't willing to give another inch at this point.
Well, that's exactly
And I
why,
said, what
right?
it's like is you got a whole cake. There's this meme about it, this cartoon. You got a whole cake, and somebody says, "Hey, be reasonable. Give me a small piece of that cake." And then say, "Yeah," come back and say, "Oh, hey, be reasonable, and just give me another small piece of
Yeah.
that cake."
Just
And
give
then
me
by
half
the
of
time
it.
it's you got like a little piece of the cake left, and you're like, "Hey, give me the whole cake." And it's
Yeah.
like, "No, I'm not giving you any more cake.
Right,
I'm
right.
done. I'm
Need a
done.
second cake,
This is
you know?
over.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going any further with this."
Exactly.
So, anyhow, long rant about
No, it's good. That was good
about
stuff.
gun
Thank
laws
you.
and stuff.
Thank you.
We've had a lot of fun over here.
Yeah.
Anything for the good of the order?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I had
no, it's
fun.
good. Another good episode.
Tony the Tech, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah,
We
thanks,
had a lot
Tony.
of fun with you,
Short
brother.
notice, he came and
Thank you, guys.
performed.
You too.
And thank you, Scott, and thank Cigar Cigars. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much to Cigar Cigars. Thank you to Tony with the Stera. We miss you, Ellie. Daddy loves you. Thanks for watching and being a part of the Mike G in the Morning family. You're not alone. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out one of the other videos suggested above.